to the April 1st, 2021, Happy April Fool's Day, school committee meeting. I'm Amanda Fargiano, and we're here at the Hopkinton High School Library. I would like to invite, let me just get my order of operations. I'd like to invite all members who are willing and able to stand and join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to start out with recognitions. Dr. Cadwell.
I just have a few very quick recognitions, and these recognitions may even be a little bit outdated. I did want to recognize Lou Sanborn and Rich Cormier. Rich is our athletic director, as everyone knows, and Lou Sanborn is his administrative assistant. They have been awarded the MSADA, which is the Massachusetts Secondary Schools Athletic Directors Association Award this year. Rich's award is technically called the Ted Damko Award. And this is a really prestigious thing for Hopkinton, and I just don't think that we have brought that forward yet. And so I did want to recognize both Rich and Lou. So congratulations to them. The MIAA, so it's almost timely that this has that we're talking about Rich and Lou right now, because the MIAA has also announced its sportsmanship essay contest winner, and our winner is none other than Owen Fitzpatrick. It's interesting, we had an email exchange, and he said to me, "Thank you, because you've been watching my essay contest winning since 6th grade." And I thought, wow, that's pretty great. So Owen has won the Library of Congress essay contest, I think twice. He's been a first place winner, and once he's been a second place winner, and at this point in time I think he is the winning most essay writer for that competition. So anyway, now he has won yet another one and put Hopkinton back in the limelight, and so congratulations to Owen, who wants to share that he is going to be an English major in college, which is really great. Yes. So those are my recognitions. Thank you.
Proud of.
Yes. Yes.
And congratulations to Mr. Cormier. It's great. Great accomplishments. Any comments from anybody, or should I? Okay. Public comment. I don't believe we have any members of the public here tonight. I will mention to the viewing public that from this point forward, I believe the school committee will be meeting in person unless there is a recording conflict with HCAM that would make your viewing impossible. So public comment is going back to the normal mechanism of in-person public comment, and members of the public who want to make a comment can attend our meeting and come to the mic during public comment for a 3-minute comment or less. Okay. All right, reports. I think we are honored to have 2 student council reps here today. I think we have Tiffany McCullis and Jake Jerko. Say your names. Thank you so much for coming. Please, if you could just borrow the mic from Mr. Markey so we can catch your audio.
So I'll go first. My name's Tiffany, and I'm a senior. And first of all, thank you so much for having us tonight. We're very appreciative of that. And also, thank you so much for all the decision-making and all the planning you guys have all done this year. Personally, I've watched almost all of the school committee meetings, so I know how tedious and how challenging this year has been. So all of us, the whole high school, the whole town is very appreciative and very grateful for all of your hard work. So tonight, I'm mostly going to be covering a little bit about the senior events that we've been planning in student council, and some comments on full return and how the students are feeling about full return. So what's happening first for seniors is we're planning to do these food truck Fridays, is what we're calling them, which on April 16th, I believe, we're doing one, and on May 14th, we are doing a food truck Friday, and this allows the seniors from both cohorts to come together, grab a bite to eat, socialize, social distance, of course, and just be together, which we haven't been able to do the whole year, which will be exciting. And then another event that we're planning is, if we do and plan to go full return on April 26th, the senior class is going to all wear their traditional camo shirts, which I think will be very exciting and very unifying of the grade. And in addition to that, senior projects are starting up soon, so for students who are doing senior projects, their last day of high school will be, unless they're doing APs, will be April 15th, I believe. So that's starting up, and I think about 100 to 110 students, seniors, are doing the senior project, which is a large amount. And then another thing we're planning is the senior gala, which I believe was mentioned in a previous meeting. And so student council members and I, along with the officers of our grade, have been meeting about once or twice a month to discuss the decorations, what's going to happen during this gala, and other information regarding that. And we kind of decided that we want to make it like a red carpet themed prom-like event. We want to try to have some sort of entrance in place of Grand March that's COVID safe. And so that's very exciting. We're all very excited for that. And during the event, we might want to have some sort of performance. I think we're going to plan to do a trivia and also announce the superlatives of the senior class. So that's definitely one of the bigger events that we're very, very excited for, and we're still continuing to plan that. So more information will come hopefully within the next couple weeks. And we also are still planning to do the parade that happened last year, which is really exciting. And that I think we plan to have on June 5th, which is actually the day after our graduation, which I think is kind of fun because it's like a last hurrah for the seniors, and it's of course safe, so that's a really important thing. And yeah, so there's a couple other events too that we're still continuing to plan. Of course, with COVID, we're not sure who's going to be vaccinated and the capacity limits and all of that. So we're definitely meeting regularly to discuss all these events. But as seniors, I think we're very, very grateful and very appreciative to have these definitely strange events, but some sort of events at the end of the year just to celebrate the class. So we're very thankful and very, very grateful, and we're excited. So.
Hi, I'm Jake Churko, and I just want to thank you for having us here today. Tiffany and I have both been part of student council throughout high school, and in a normal year we'd meet every Tuesday morning. We'd have a structured meeting like every week, but obviously this year it's different and we could only have it over Zoom, but thankfully our administrators and our officers of student council have allowed us to have Zooms consistently and still be productive in our meetings, although not as productive as we've been in the past since events are kind of difficult to have. We can still plan these events and hopefully continue to plan events in the future. Additionally, Tiffany and I were both athletes during COVID and throughout our high school experience. Obviously, COVID made us have to wear masks and social distance during our activities, and oftentimes we'd have to change or cancel altogether our activities like tournaments and invitationals for cross country, which I did, which was kind of a bummer. And additionally, like spaggers, which are personally my favorite part, we couldn't really have them, and limited amount of people could go to them if we even had them, and it was social distanced, so it was kind of just a bummer. But overall, I think I speak for every athlete saying that we are grateful for everything that everybody has done and who is in the process to even allow us to have a season. I am extremely grateful to have a season, and I believe everyone else is too. Additionally, after this challenging year, there are a few things that the senior class would like to leave behind to the future of HHS students, leaders, and teammates. Obviously, remote learning developed throughout this school year, and it's been incredible to see the flexibility of all the teachers and how great they have been. And one day is remote, one day is in person, and sometimes they won't even know which one the next day would be. And I think they know that they're working hard and they have lesson plans for whatever the situation might be. Additionally, I think it's really important to notice that leading through this difficult time, while it may be super challenging to lead, it's also the most important time to lead, because we've seen leaders emerge through the administration, people in the town, teammates, and students, and these leaders have allowed us to continue through this difficult time and find success in school and academics and sports and everything. Finally, about full return, there are of course many questions, but I know the administration is working extremely hard to make the shift back to full return as smooth and as safe as possible, and I really appreciate that. And personally, I'm looking forward to full return, to have a structure in my life and be able to see all my friends from the different cohort will be really nice. and I'm just really excited for that personally, and I think a lot of other students are too. So thank you for all your work with that, and thank you for having us here today.
We love to have you here. We love to have the students here, so we're so grateful that you guys would come out in cool weather. School committee members, who would like to talk?
This is the first time we've had students in person for a long time, isn't it?
I think so.
It's so wonderful to see young people in real life. I've only witnessed digital versions of you, so thank you so much for coming. It really cheers us all to hear you. Thank you.
And also, just I think on behalf of your fellow high school students, I know that you guys put a lot into planning these things and to keeping morale high, and I know that does not go unnoticed by, I'm sure, your peers, but also by the adults in the community. So thank you for that. There are pieces that we definitely cannot capture in the way that you guys do. And Food Truck Friday sounds fun.
I know. Is school committee invited to Food Truck Friday? Just asking. Joe?
Yeah, excellent work. Thanks, Tiffany, for the update on all the activities for the end of the year. And I'm glad to know what the graduation date is and the car parade, and that you're still planning the senior gala, and details TBD. But keep it up, because a lot of people are depending on that, and what you're doing is helping with the whole morale and the lifetime memories for your class. So good work to both of you. Thank you.
Leah?
I reiterate what everyone else said. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I think your idea of the camo day in April is fantastic. I know that that's like one of the big days for seniors. So I love that you found a way to schedule it and to get it going. So much appreciation for your creativity, right, and for your drive.
Yeah, and I agree with my colleagues, and having had a senior last year, I know Camo Day was so fun, the first day of school. I mean, all these events are fun, but I'm also excited for the new traditions that maybe you're starting. The gala sounds amazing, so I'm really excited to see how that comes together, and very thankful, as Ms. Kavanaugh said, that you are taking the time to do all this planning, because we all know we spend a lot of time on Zoom with work and everything else, and one more Zoom meeting can just be pretty exhausting, and that your commitment to continuing to meet, even though you have to do it on Zoom on top of class Zooms and everything else, it's just phenomenal, and you're staying very positive, which is great. So thank you so much, and I can't believe you watched our meetings. I'm thrilled. Thank you. Thank you for that too. We love having an audience. So yep, please keep us informed at our following up meetings, and good luck with everything. Thank you so much.
Let us know if you need anything from us for the support there.
And definitely, so we will also help get the word out about your parade on the 5th or 6th, because the community last year loved that event. It's great for you guys, but the community as a whole really enjoyed it as well. So
June
we'll help get
5th.
the word out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
Fabulous. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. You too.
I think we have Ms. Rothermick with the capital project report.
I was having difficulty with it. I had it connected before we went into executive session. Are you having trouble with it right now?
Well, I'm going to try.
We
but
can circle
I
back.
see that it says no signal, so.
I think it said that before it worked.
We could take Mr. Keller.
Mr. Keller does have 2 students waiting, and Mr. Keller, I did share with you the Zoom link. I don't know if you're able to connect to that to get your kids up there. Hi, guys. They're sitting here just watching me.
Okay.
See
So
if you're able to connect.
let's just take this out of order, so that since we have our students and we have Mr. Keller and Ms. Rothermick, we'll see if she can connect.
Okay.
So this is actually new business item A, grade 8 Civic ambassadors, I believe?
Yes.
Okay. And we have with us on Zoom is Aya Curdy, Ilian Gloss, and Dylan Streak. I probably didn't do your names justice. I apologize for that.
I believe I have 2 out of the 3.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Keller.
Okay, sorry. I can't seem to connect either, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Last time I did this, I got 4 different TVs, not that one, and then about 15 minutes in, I was able to connect to that one.
Do you need slides, or do you just want to see?
No, no, no. I was just trying to. I don't have any. I don't have slides. I was just trying to put them up there.
Do you want to turn them around?
Yes, I will turn them around. I'm going to turn you around so you can see Mr. Keller. How's that?
Or so if HCAM could see them as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
You could zoom in on the laptop. There they are.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Back in February, Close Up, which is a civic education group that we have worked with in the past, we've taken our students when we went to Washington, D.C. On a program with Close Up. They had introduced us to an ambassador program that is for grade 8 students nationwide that were going to participate in a program focused on race, justice, and equity. This program had 4 civic engagement workshops for students from across the nation to engage in. And so the goal of those workshops were to have students connect their experiences and personal stories to conversations happening in society about race, justice, and equity, to refine their skills for active citizenship, and to bring their knowledge and skills back home in their role as an ambassador. So Ms. Benbenek, Mr. Ocampo, teachers, and I created a list of grade 8 students that we thought would be a good fit. We were limited to 3, unfortunately. And so it was hard work to get that down to 3, but ultimately we selected Aya Curdy, Ilian Glaze, and Dylan Streak, who are here tonight, I believe, as I'm looking across the room. I see Aya and Dylan. They were willing to represent HMS. And there were 4 sessions, as I think I had mentioned previously. And so the first session was an opportunity for students from across the country to share stories and make connections between the themes that they heard that night and broader political, social, and economic issues taking place in our country. The second session was focused on root cause activity, and students would choose from 4 national issues that mattered to them. The 4 issues were educational equity, environmental justice, criminal justice, and healthcare and COVID-19. The third session, students examined case studies of young activists in our country making changes. And then the fourth session was focused on how they can bring back these tools to their schools and their communities. So thank you so much for allowing us to talk about this tonight and to be able to present Aya, Ilian, and Dylan to share a little bit about their experience, or at least I hope they're going to be able to do so.
Dr. Kavanaugh, can
Oh,
yeah.
there they are.
All right.
So, Aya, I hope you've been able to hear me. Have you? You know?
put your mic down?
So, Dr. Kavanaugh, if you can just tell her if she can share an experience of hers. Can you hear me, Aya? Probably not, right? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, I can go. Yeah, hi, I'm Aya. The program was such a great opportunity and experience meeting 8th graders from all over the U.S., and we got to hear many different perspectives and opinions and stories about youth activists making change in their communities, which was very eye-opening for me. And it also helped me learn where to start and the steps to take to make change in our own community. And even though it's online, I think they did a very good job of making it fun, and we had a lot of great conversations.
Thanks, Aya. Dylan, can you share a little bit about your personal experience?
Yeah, so I'm Dylan, and I thought that it was a great experience because you got to meet people from around the country that had interests in similar topics that you did. So you got to hear their opinions on them and maybe add to your ideas because you might have thought that their ideas were really good. And it helped me learn that it's really good to listen to other people's ideas because, like I said before, you can implement their ideas into your ideas. And like Aya said, it was they made it really fun because there were a lot of icebreakers and group conversations that occurred at each meeting.
Fabulous. Thank you both. And so I've had an opportunity to meet with the two of them and with Ilian to kind of talk about kind of next steps and where we go. So it was an exciting opportunity to be able to have our students attend and then also bring those pieces back.
That's wonderful. School committee members, do you have any questions for our guests, our Zoom guests, or Mr. Keller? I have a question, actually. I'm wondering if they could share, they probably can't hear me, but if they could share which issues they picked, which issues they sat in on, which sessions.
So in case you guys are wondering, if you didn't hear that, we are wondering, Mrs. Fargiano has posed a question, what issues did you pick? Like, which ones of those workshops did you choose to attend?
Yeah, so we were put into separate rooms, and so our groups kind of did like a poll to see which ones they were most interested in, and my group focused on racial equality.
Yes, as Dylan said, we all picked what we're interested in, and so our group also picked racial equality, and we did research and a lot of conversations and seeing different opinions on police brutality.
That's wonderful. I'm really interested to see how this sort of plants a seed and it sort of blossoms in the middle school with the work that they bring to you. And thank you so much for pursuing this program.
Yeah.
And thank you. You can't see me, but thank you so much for participating and representing Hopkinton with kids across the country. I'm sure you learned a lot, and there were a lot of interesting new perspectives, I imagine, from kids in other parts of the U.S.
Yeah, and it's tied nicely in. So we've been, one of our school improvement plan goals have been to focus our work, similar to what the high school has been doing, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the work that they're doing, the work that Mr. Ocampo, one of the assistant principals at the middle school, and Ms. Tice, one of the assistant principals here at the high school, have been doing and working with teachers and taking that next step forward with bringing students into the fold in terms of the committee. This lends itself right into that. So it's been a nice union of those two pieces.
It's wonderful.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
And so thankful to have you both here to tell us in person. We always enjoy having students here and hearing about the experiences you have. So thank you. I was going to say, I keep looking at the screen.
I know.
It's such a great opportunity for middle school students to take part in something like this, and I'm so impressed by how articulate and intelligent and grateful they are just to be involved in something like this. So thank you.
I am super impressed by their drive. I don't think in 8th grade I would have done any kind of ambassadors program, so it's really, really cool that you take an interest in something that important at your age and that you're bringing that back. And I'm sort of curious, you're talking about young activists, and I was wondering if there's one that stuck out in your head from the talks that you did and the workshops.
So the question to you is there a particular young activist that kind of stands out to you from the workshop that you did?
Well, one of the workshops that we did, there were 6 young activists, and I thought that they were all pretty influential because of how they kind of did protests and were able to bring a lot of people on to their ideas from basically nothing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't recall the exact name of the person right now, but there was this one kid who he was bullied a lot in middle school and elementary school for being part of the LGBTQ plus community, and then so he reached out to like authorities around him, like the principal and the counselors, and he did a lot of research, and then he made his own he made like a club, and then it ended up being a whole organization, and he also wrote 2 books when he got older. So it was really inspiring to see how he, from so young, he made change, and then also became into something so much bigger as time passed by.
That's great. That's really inspirational. I love having a person here who
I
has
know. All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you to our students. I'm sure you have homework and other things you have to do, but we really appreciate you taking the time to come and join us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for making Hopkinton so proud of you. All right, good night. Bye, guys.
I wonder if the school committee is okay with us letting Mr. Keller finish his topics, and then we can return back to our order.
Yep.
Okay? All right, so I think we have item B of new business, grade 7 Nature's Classroom. Mr. Keller?
Yes, thank you for allowing, for changing your agenda around to accommodate that. As I'm sure you all know, this year's grade 6 class was not able to attend a field trip that has become a tradition for grade 6 at Hopkinton Middle School. It's a Nature's Classroom overnight field trip. We believe that the science-based and social and natural experiences are incredibly valuable. And as you may recall, when I was here on February 4th, you approved next year's grade 6 Nature's Classroom. Well, that might have been Zoom. I can't remember the person. But at any rate, when I presented to you on February 4th, you approved the grade 6 Nature's Classroom field trip to Charlton, Mass, where we have been going for about 5 years now. And at that time, I shared that we were looking at options for next year's grade 7 since they weren't able to go. So we've been working with an organization that's now called Nature's Classroom New England. They were formerly known as Outdoor Classroom, and they offered a very similar Nature's Classroom experience. It's former employees of Nature's Classroom. And so I won't go into tremendous detail unless you want it, but the original Nature's Classroom organization has sold a bunch of its sites to Nature's Classroom New England. So next year, our grade 6 class will be going to Nature's Classroom in Charlton, and we are proposing a grade 7 field trip to Nature's Classroom New England, and the site is Freedom, New Hampshire. They were able to find dates for us. It's the week of Monday, November 8th through Wednesday, November 10th. So that's 3 days, 2 nights. The cost is $290 per student. That includes housing, meals, program and medical staff, insurance, and transportation via coach bus. So I am seeking your approval for that grade 7 overnight field trip.
I have a question. So, actually, I have 2 questions. So, are just because this is later than we typically do Nature's Classroom, is this site also heated? Are the cabins heated for the kids?
Yes, they are. They are.
It's a beautiful. I actually know where that site is. It's a beautiful area, and I think that would be a great experience for them. Is there flexibility if, for some reason, due to the pandemic, they're still not able to travel overnight at that point?
Yeah, so they're not going to collect $1 from us until we actually go. And so we will need to take money from parents ahead of time to collect that money. But ultimately, that will stay here, and we'll be able to reimburse it if we don't wind up going. And so we're able to reschedule. That's all as part of the contract to be able to reschedule, and they're recognizing that schools will need that flexibility in order to commit to that. And the site is a gorgeous site. We actually were looking at it a couple of years ago. Charlton is close and it's convenient, and sometimes staff can do 1 day or 2 days. But when we used to go to Colebrook, Connecticut, that's quite a hike. So we found that we weren't getting a lot of staff that were willing to go for 3 or 4 days. So that's why we kind of kept it at Charlton. But given our desire to have this 7th grade field trip, and given that there weren't a lot of openings, this seemed like an opportunity to pursue this. And it is, for those of you that are maybe familiar with that area, it's Camp Cody is actually the site up in Freedom, New Hampshire. So, yeah.
I think this is great. You've made a lot of 6th graders happy, and their parents, of course. But I'm so glad they're doing this. It's such a great opportunity for community.
Yeah, I remember that discussion from the meeting, and we felt terrible that the 6th graders are missing that, because it's such a, it's not just a trip, it's a defining moment in their middle school career and something they remember. It kind of, I think, is part of the culture that you build in the middle school. So I'm so glad that you found a date for the current 6th graders to do it, even though it's a year late. So that's great. Thank you.
I 100% echo everything. I think it's fabulous that these students are going to have a chance to do this. It is transformative for many kids, and I'm thrilled. I really like the dates. I think it's Veterans Day week, so it's kind of nestled nicely between the weekend and Veterans Day.
Yes.
So congratulations to you for finding this, and I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this trip.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed? It passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being flexible.
Excellent.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, so for those of us following along the agenda, we're going back into our capital project report. Ms. Rothermick, are we in a better technical place? Okay, great. If anyone's just tuning in to the school committee meeting, we took a few items out of order, so we're going back to the capital project report, and then we'll continue on with the reports in order.
Thank you. So this is the capital. So capital projects. School facilities represent the second largest sector of public infrastructure spending after highways. Available spending data indicates 53% of public school districts report the need to update or replace multiple building systems. More than 1/3 have portable buildings due to capacity constraints, and the best estimates indicate a minimum of a $38 billion annual funding gap for public school facilities. So just as a reminder, school buildings are used not only for learning, library, sports, and feeding children, but also for community meetings, emergency centers, and shelters to provide a safe and healthy environment that is conducive to learning for children of all ages. School buildings need to be in good condition, provide adequate space, natural light, working heat and air conditioning, clean water, modern technology to fulfill a host of other functions. So when we're talking about capital projects, what are we talking about? You can see all the different pieces that go into what we are managing as part of the capital for the Hopkinton district. The buildings, 120 acres of land, the mechanical systems, and of that includes over 600 pieces of individual pieces of equipment. So looking at how do we fit all of this together in terms of making a plan. So when you talk about buildings, you look at the exterior. You have the roof, the exterior walls, windows, and doors. Then you move to the interior, which again includes the walls, the doors, floors, and then you're talking about space and enrollment. For land, you're talking about the fields, your parking lots, the driveways, the traffic patterns, and the irrigation system that goes all throughout the property. Mechanical systems, that means your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, often referred to as HVAC, electrical, energy management, plumbing, refrigeration, and technology. And as an example of all the individual pieces of equipment, there's over 135 univents, 110 exhaust fans, 44 units of refrigeration, on and on, as you can see, 27 units of ground maintenance, down to 217 units of technology, mostly representing the cameras. So there are multiple pieces that all feed into what we're talking about in terms of this planning. So as you can see, when you're talking about a building, it's multiple layers, multiple things that work together in terms of planning on those capital projects. So when you're looking at how do you make those decisions, you're looking at your replacement cycle consideration. So there's a need to implement regular, comprehensive major maintenance, renewal, and construction programs, as well as the implementation of the preventive maintenance program to extend the life of school facilities. So as you can see, when you're looking at the maintenance spectrum from the no maintenance up to the predictive maintenance, we as a district need to be in the preventive maintenance to the predictive maintenance categories to really make sure that we are maximizing the efficiency in terms of how we are handling everything within the district. So what goes into those considerations? A life cycle cost analysis reviews the costs associated with the planning, funding, design, construction, operation, maintenance, and decommissioning of each piece of equipment. And as you're doing that, you need to explore emerging technologies. You need to speak to vendors. You need to understand what's out there. Not everything is right for this district, but you need to know. So there is that exploration going on at all times. So as we move on into our capital projects, since 2018, and this includes funding that has come from capital appropriations, grants such as the Green Communities, the CARES, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which we'll get into more in a minute, revolving accounts, and the operating budget. So within buildings, we have put in classroom additions, we've done weatherization, windows, doors, solar installations, flooring. For your land, you've installed the bus parking lot, the turf field, and there's always installations with the irrigation. Within the mechanical systems, we have touched lighting, HVAC, the energy management, plumbing, refrigeration, and technology. So what does that mean when you break that down into equipment? Since 2018, we've replaced 32 exhaust fans, 2 RTU compressors, 1 fire alarm system, 30 units of custodial equipment, 6 units of grounds maintenance, 14 units for refrigeration and kitchen, 12 variable frequency drives, 60 units of technology, 27 units for water systems, and LED lighting. And you can see within each one of those categories, for instance, custodial equipment includes floor scrubbers, backpack vacs, those Protexus sprayers that we've talked about so much, carpet scrubbers, orbital scrubbers, the ground maintenance. There's been an addition of a groomer, a utility vehicle, the mower, the field paint sprayer, the sander, and the snow blower. So just to give you an idea of what we have done, again, since 2018. So as we know, in 2021, we did not actually have any capital projects due to the pandemic, the delay of the town meeting, moving it to the fall, and there was a hold put on capital projects. However, that did not stop what needed to be done. We used the Green Communities grant to install LED lighting at Hopkins. There was weatherization done at the high school. And at the high school, also we upgraded the building management system, and that was done through the Green Communities grant. The funding that came through with COVID funding, we increased the controls in the building management system again at 3 buildings, Hopkins High School and the middle school. We addressed ventilation through window repair and replacements, and that was done district-wide. HVAC repairs were done district-wide. That was another 15 units. Exhaust fan replacements, again, looking at ventilation, that was another 19 units. Cleaning equipment at 20 units. And the bottle fillers, which again is that touchless water system for the students, for 21 units. So these are the projects that were done in this fiscal year, again, not using capital appropriation, but using other funding sources. So the capital projects that right now have moved forward for town meeting approval in May is the HVAC for district-wide, the boiler replacement, the roof replacement, security upgrades, technology upgrades, the district planning study, and the marathon addition. And as a reminder, the vehicle, the wetlands order of condition, and the White House exterior have not been moved forward for funding. So these are the projects that are planned that if passed at town meeting would be moving forward for fiscal year 22. And then as we go into that further extension, what are we looking at over the next 10 years? In a previous meeting, Dr. Kavanaugh spoke about the need for addressing space issues for the buildings to 157 million. Land, one of the things that has been talked about that has been on that 10-year plan is the track replacement. Your mechanical systems, again, you will continue to touch your HVAC and technology, and there's potential to increase solar installations where we could then reduce our operating costs for utilities. And equipment, of course, is that continuous replacement using that life cycle analysis that we spoke about in the previous slides. So that is what we're looking at as we've presented in the Capitol in the fall. This is that 10-year lookout. And that's it. Questions?
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments, observations?
Not necessarily on what you presented, although it did touch on it, is my hope is that we will be more successful in having the White House project advance next year. You know, without a doubt.
It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of projects that we've done and that we plan to do, and the 157 million that's a huge number. I'm glad we're getting it out there because there's kind of sticker shock, and as we have more public sessions about that, I hope that we can explain where that's coming from, and I know that's there is a lot of work in that area planned. So actually, Dr. Kavanaugh, can you explain like what else don't we have an article on town meeting that's going to help us with the planning and on that specific
We
capital?
do. I think it was just in Mrs.
Yeah.
Rothermick's presentation. I believe it's the $80,000 district planning study.
Right.
Yes.
And that's where we'll help, that study will help us figure out a plan for that
Yes.
10-year build-out?
Hopefully it will help us to look at, some of the parcels of land that are available in the community in the event that we are invited into the MSBA for the Elmwood School. It will also help us to start to analyze grade configurations. So I know we've said many times that Marathon was built as an early childhood center. So that's a beautiful school that would be unchanging, but we also have, space constraints, I think, that we're looking at Hopkins School, at Elmwood School, at middle school, and even though we have put modular classrooms onto 2 of those schools and we've put an addition here, we have to remember that those additions and modulars are really for the children who are already here in front of us. So that's what the 80,000 will do. It will help us to really analyze what we need to do going forward. The other thing I just want to point out, because it was going through my mind while Mrs. Rothermick was presenting, is, you see all of those dollar amounts up there, but, along with all of those dollar amounts are literally hundreds of thousands of purchase orders and requisitions and all of the work of Mr. Person and his teams in custodial and maintenance. And I just want to point out how hard all of those people are working, people who work in the central office to process all of that. I mean, it's amazing how much is done behind the scenes that I don't know that we give credit to those particular employees for. So it's really important work, and you can see how hard they've worked since 2018.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm amazed at the level of detail we go into, and I think we're really lucky to have you on the team for these building projects. I appreciate, too, that you kind of provided all this, but within the context of the overarching, responsibility districts have for maintaining their building infrastructure. You can let buildings grow old and fall apart, but they don't become any cheaper that way. And replacing them doesn't get cheaper year by year either. So thanks for putting it in that economic context as well.
It's extremely important, and the community has been very generous in supporting maintaining the facilities and the district. So as you can see from that very first slide, that is not the case in most communities.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Can you go to the next slide with the costs for the 10 years? So this is total cost, right? This doesn't take into account things like the Elmwood School work that we have going on with trying to get grants and help to pay for it, right? That would reduce, let's say, this number, correct?
That should reduce the 157 million.
Right, okay. So that's not all going to come from the community over 10 years. We're going to do a lot of work to try to get that money from other places, and we'll have to supplement what we can get with money from the community, right?
That's correct. If we were invited into a building project, an MSBA building project, then, and keep in mind that 157 million is not just the Elmwood building project. That's looking at all 5 buildings categorically, how much square footage we are in a deficit in terms of the MSBA standards. So a big majority of that 157 is a potential 2 to 5, if you will, or touching both your 2-3 and your 4-5 and getting those up. If that is part of an MSBA project, yes, that number comes down.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I agree with Joe. You've done tremendous work with us, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mrs. Rothermeck, for your, as ever, precise and level-headed estimates. I had a question about the wetland order of conditions that's not going to be funded. Can you say a little bit about that and the consequence of it not being funded this year?
So this order of conditions is very old. It's from the time that the original high school fields were installed with the building of the high school. So we have an outstanding order with the DEP that it just will always be out there. So it can get in the way. For instance, if we were to move forward trying to do that track and we have an outstanding order of conditions, that may stand in the way of doing that track. So it is something that needs to be addressed. It doesn't just go away.
All right, thank you very much.
And I just echo everyone else. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think it's important for us and for the community to have an opportunity to look and see all that we've done since 2018 even. And I like how you casually said, well, there was a freeze on capital projects, but still, we did this whole slide worth of things through, again, the aggressive pursuit of grant money, which I know a lot of people in central office are involved in. And we're just very lucky that you pay such careful attention to this. I also share, Nancy's concerns about the White House. Really hoping that we get that, addressed. I know it's budgets are budgets, and not everything gets funded. But I do believe that we were able, through the district-wide windows and doors, to address some of the components of the project that we originally scoped, which is great. I'm really glad that we have at least addressed the windows and the doors for, for ventilation and so forth. So we're chipping away at it, but that is a particular project that I think is of interest to most of us. But yes, thank you very much. It's important to keep bringing this back, keep it on our radar, and help the community see just the enormity of the job, the number of acres. I mean, and then I think we had 4 vehicles. I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of acres for 4 vehicles. I feel like I see that vehicle didn't make the cut, and I know that we do a lot to make our resources stretch, and so I appreciate that. But I guess it is what it is. But this is just a great report for us. Thank you.
Sorry, just to ask a follow-up, because I think Leah's point was excellent. When you look at that large number at the top, I think you do sort of lose sight of how much the MSBA could potentially cover for any MSBA-related projects. Can you remind us what was the percentage that the MSBA picked up of the or rough dollar cost of the marathon project?
I believe it was in the 30s.
Yeah, around 30%, around 14
so
million.
That's a big chunk of change if we're looking at other building projects.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one final question? And it's not totally for me. I've heard a lot of members of the community asking what the White House is, and so I was hoping that maybe we could just spend like 5 minutes just saying what the White House is, so that people aren't confused about why we find it so important to, get it repaired. And
Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure, I'm happy to. Well, the White House is just a White House. As the community, as you're driving up, either Hayden Rose Street or you're right out here in front of the middle school, and you see the water tower. Next to that, there's literally just a small white house that has been there forever and ever. And originally, well, at least when I got here, we had special education, the director and a couple of secretarial staff on the first floor, and upstairs we had building and grounds personnel as well as our bus dispatcher. And when we looked at that space and we realized that space here in the high school was very compromised, we decided that we would take the 18 to 22 program out of the high school, because really we should give them their own space. I mean, technically they're not high school students any longer. And so we engaged in a project where we totally renovated the first floor of that building. So now there's, you know, a nice kitchen in there, and an area for kind of just hanging out, and a nice dining room space and academic spaces. And so our 18 to 22 program is housed there. And I don't want people to think that they're in there all day, every day, because they very frequently go out to job sites. And today, Mrs. Rothermick and I were in a meeting where our 18 to 22 program is starting their own business. So that's a very exciting project for them. So that's what the White House is. But I think over time, every time, and this year is no different, as you get to all of your budget items, you know, there are some things that kind of come off the table, and you can take a look at that building, and even though we've put in new doors and new windows and we've renovated the interior, as you're driving past the exterior, you will take great note to see that the roof needs a whole lot of work, and a lot of the clapboards and, you know, fascia boards and things like that all need to be replaced as well, because there's a lot of wood rot there. So when people look and say, well, how much would that cost? It's, you know, the cost to repair the exterior is significant, and we're hoping to make sure that that can happen, because it houses a very worthy program, and it needs a little bit of, I mean, it's not just that it needs something aesthetic, it actually needs something that is, you know, kind of dire at this point.
Thank you. I really appreciate the clarification. I just wanted to follow up, because you're not always tooting your own horn where I think you could, but Dr. Kavanaugh had really spearheaded this project for the interior, and it was done largely on donated materials and work in there, and it's beautiful wonderful inside. I also will add that if you drive around town and look at every building that the town owns, the exterior of this building is probably in the worst shape of anything the town owns. And that, as a program that houses a special education program, I think that we want to make sure that we are showing the value that we place on that program.
Thank you. That's very appreciated.
Okay, Ms. Rothermick, I think you're up again with the COVID grant spending report.
Okay, so what we have heard a lot about during this year in the pandemic is what will be the funding that will help us get through everything that needs to be done to respond to this public health emergency. So the federal government has enacted at least 5 pieces of legislation in response to the public health emergency caused by COVID-19. The largest and most notable with the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act, which was signed into law on March 27th, 2020. The $2.2 trillion package includes numerous initiatives, including but not limited to the Paycheck Protection Program, economic impact payments, economic Virus Relief Fund, CVRF, for state and local governments, and an array of other initiatives and expansion to existing programs. So within that, what we'll talk about in the next couple slides is the CARES funding, that CVRF, and ESSER funds. Most recently, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 was enacted on December 27th, 2020. This law authorized another $900 billion in additional COVID-related assistance, and out of that came the CVRF2 and ESSER 2. Each of these legislations has its own eligibility requirements, funding formula, reporting requirements, and spending deadlines. So the COVID funds Eligibility uses included are as follows: telework, hiring and training, PPE, sanitation of all kinds, cleaning, disinfecting, specialized cleaning equipment, air filtration, HVAC, ventilation, distance learning, planning and development, incremental costs for special education, food for families, signage and communication, educational materials, testing for COVID, and behavioral health. And we have touched on every one of those categories in what you'll see in these next slides. So this gives you a timeline of what we are looking for. The very first one is the first initiative that was funded, the CVRF and the CARES, which originally was to expire on 12/31 and then was expanded to not expire until June 30th. So that is our first timeline. The next three grants are the title grants, which are really not related to COVID. But then you follow down to that ESSER 1, which the funding goes through September of 22, and ESSER 2, where the funding goes through until September of 23. So the CARES Act fund, the very first piece that came out, distributed $1.6 million to the town of Hopkinton, which was also shared with the school district. Of that, the school district spent $684,000. Salaries were spent on overtime for all those positions that were added: nurses, technology, teachers, paraprofessionals. Technology, software, document cameras, TVs, computers, additional VHS seats, cleaning supplies of all kinds, PPE, plexiglass, signage, repair and maintenance, these were our HVAC reviews, and then more additional contracted nursing. The CVRF, this was distributed directly to the school district, and out of that, this was the spending that was done at $866,000. Supplies was additional custodial equipment, athletic and classroom supplies, cleaning supplies, PPE, the tents that you see in each of the buildings. Contracted, this is where you see the HVAC replacements, those bottle fillers, the touchless water fountains, tutoring, storage rentals, as we changed our classrooms to be 6 feet of distance and had to get as much out of the classrooms as possible. Again, additional VHS seats, transportation equipment, which allowed for contact tracing. Salaries, again, as the CARES, the town piece, and we moved over into the CVRF, those same positions, the teaching, nurse, paraprofessional, and overtime. Stipends for additional services for student needs. MTRS, that's mass teachers. If you pay a teacher a teaching position through a grant, you also have to pay into the mass teacher retirement system a percentage. So that's where those benefits, that's just part of every grant that's out there, and a small amount on other. The ESSER fund for $49,000 for contracted was professional development and training, stipends for curriculum work to assess with educational needs, supplies, educational technology, digital resources to assist with remote learning. Then again, as we stated, at December 27th, we've got that next round of funding, and this is that CVRF 2, which was really starting to target toward the full-time reopening costs. So for supplies, furniture, these are the desks that we've talked about, the additional desks that we are needed to do the 3 feet of distancing within the classroom, but still maintain 6 feet of distancing for lunches. Food service equipment to increase access, social distancing, and contactless serving. And salaries, the hiring for lunch monitors and the continuation of staff that are still teaching remote as chosen by families. And the ESSER 2, again, targeted towards full-time reopening. The contracted dollars will go towards pool testing, contact tracers, and coordinators, so those are staff, and addressing mental health for that 10,000. So what does this mean for the future? So we have spent a lot of money in readying the schools and trying to prepare and address all costs that had to do with that very first, or the second slide that said what we could spend it on. But what does the future mean? The Massachusetts could receive up to an additional $2 billion in direct aid from the $1.9 trillion President Biden's American Rescue Plan. The federal package includes billions of dollars in direct aid to local governments, money that can be spent to make up for lost revenue, boost local businesses, and fund essential infrastructure expenses. The exact requirements of what this funding will be are not released yet. So that remains to be seen at this point in time. That's a quick down and dirty on our COVID spending.
Mr. Oliver, is there also an ESSER 3? There's not an ESSER 3.
I think it's coming though.
There will be one coming. Okay.
So with the CARES Act, with the extension of the deadline, I guess this was the first time I'd heard about the extension of the deadline, was there also an increase in the funding for it, or did it just extend the deadline?
They just extended the deadline. The original deadline being December 30th, there was a lot of pushback in that the issues and the staff that were hired to address COVID-related pandemic situations didn't go away on December 30th, and those staff would continue through the rest of the year. So that was finally heard, in addition to other things. And so the deadline was extended, but the funding was not. But you see, different funding came through.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
On a general level, this is enormously helpful because I think both the community members and as well as the committee members know of the grant money. And obviously we know that it is being put to very important use to get our students in the doors and to keep things humming along safely and efficiently. But to have an idea of how that money has supported our initiatives has been really helpful to have you lay this out. I guess a question I have is, as you're thinking about additional spending required through the end of the year, are you, it looks like most of our grant money has been spoken for, so are you in a position where you're fairly comfortable with how things are looking? I know at we had a financial report at our last meeting, and I think the expenses were running a little off, but are you generally, based on anticipated potential future funding and this grant money, are you feeling pretty good about things?
In terms of the operating budget, I think we'll continue to be able to cover deficits. As you can imagine, what was budgeted is very different than what the principals are facing. So if something is clearly COVID related in terms of additional wraparound supports, materials that maybe are needed for remote learning, additional digital resources, if you will, we're able to use the grant. So what they're buying looks very different than what they had in mind when they created their budget.
Of course, yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Appreciation all around. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now up to Dr. Kavanaugh, Superintendent's report.
Okay.
for that thing to warm up. All right, so this is the superintendent's report for Thursday, April 1st, 2021. Just a very quick COVID-19 update. What I have on the screen right there are just two screenshots that come from our newly established COVID-19 dashboard. What you can see on the left-hand side, it's showing you the active cases, the 7 total cases for this date range. So if you look at Marathon, there are 2 cases, Elmwood 1, Hopkins 1, the middle school 2, and the high school 1. Currently, our cumulative cases have risen to 183. And typically, you know, I present those, but now people can just access the website and see them, so you can see how many cases we've had over time in each one of the schools. And thank you to our nurses who are keeping this up. On the other side, you can just see that we've got a bar graph over there, so you can take a look at a date range. And so if you got an email today saying, you know, a person is tested positive in the middle school, and you're saying, why doesn't that appear on April 1st? It's because we go by the testing date, not the reporting date. So if a student went and had a COVID test yesterday on March 31st, and today we got the results that that particular student is COVID positive, we put the testing date in there, not the reporting date in there. So sometimes it could be 48 hours before we learn, or sometimes a student or a faculty member will go and get tested somewhere, and then it's not until we hear from the Department of Public Health or from a parent, and it can be a couple days out. So just so you have a sense of what it is that we're using for consistency. I know people are interested in pool testing, so we have chosen the vendor JCM Analytics. And yesterday we had our JCM Analytics kickoff meeting, and Mrs. Rothermick was there. We had 3 of our school nurses, a couple of representatives from the vendor, and I. And what we have come to realize is that we're going to need to secure someone to be our testing administrator, somebody to sort of run point to, you know, to make sure that when parents get the consent forms and fill them out, we have accurate lists of, you know, who is taking part in pool testing and who's not taking part in pool testing. We will be organizing those consent forms, and we have to have somebody also who would be manning our kiosks. So the way that it works is this. If a family signs on and they have 2 students, for example, let's imagine that they have one at Hopkins and one at the high school, those 2 children will swab at home. And then they take their own swab and they put it into the pre-packaging. They take all of the materials they need home with them ahead of time so that they can swab at home and bring it back on the appropriate day. When they come into school, there'll be sort of what we would call a kiosk, but it's really just a couple of tables set up. And somebody, you know, scans their barcode, it goes in a bag, so that when that particular swab gets to a lab, even though it's tested in a batch, so they would test the entire batch to see if anyone is COVID positive. If the answer to that is no, great, that whole batch is considered to be done. But if someone in that batch, or maybe more than one person in that batch, happened to be COVID positive, we have the ability in that lab to test every one of those swabs, because there's a name or a student attached to, or a faculty member attached to each one of those swabs. So the nice part is that we lose no time on learning, because kids are swabbing in schools. Instead, they're swabbing at home. And in the event that someone does test positive, we know who that person is. So it's not like we have to quarantine 19 people because one might be positive. We don't have to set up tents. We don't have to have our nurses doing additional reflex testing. All of that is done off-site. So hopefully we will be having a soft opening, maybe on the week of April 12th. And we talked a little bit yesterday about maybe just launching this thing with teachers only at first, to see where the hiccups are, to do a much smaller group of people. And again, this is entirely voluntary. And then maybe we will have a full beginning target date of Monday, April 26th, which is also, or at least during that week of when our kids are coming back to school. Does that sound like I've captured everything reasonably well? Okay. Just some enrollment updates. These are the 21-22 projections, so you won't see them in our traditional, you know, graphs that you see all the time. Kindergarten right now has 130 approved students with 44 pending. So at this point in time, we have 174 total K students in the queue for next year. And then when we look at enrollment across the other grades, 1 to 12, right now we have 35 new registrants for fiscal year 22. All right, and just to give you a really quick update, what you see on the screen is the enrollment data for March 18th, which was the last time we met, and we were at 4,017 students. And if we take a look at today's, we have simply gone to 4,021 students. So we are 4 students greater today than we were 2 weeks ago. It probably is, worth talking about a little bit here that our building principals, in addition to working super hard to get our buildings reopened and, invite back some of our students who have been remote and kind of figure all of that out, we have, also seen some of our kids, new students coming into buildings. So they're kind of running orientations almost simultaneously with reopening the doors. So it's been a lot of work for our elementary school principals who will be opening the doors on Monday. All right, and I know that people have been interested in social emotional learning, and I think it's really important to talk about this topic just so we get a sense that social emotional learning isn't just something that's reactive. And by reactive, I mean, you hire these people for therapeutic or for counseling kinds of reasons. What we really need to see is that social emotional learning, and I'll read that whole definition there that comes from CASEL. And CASEL is an organization, it's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They are sort of the authority in all of this, and I think we have a tendency to gravitate to what it is that they tell us. So by definition, social and emotional learning is an integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitude to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So we get that particular definition, and then we have to remember this, that social emotional competencies can be taught, modeled, and practiced and lead to positive student outcomes that are important for success in school and in life. So I think that's an important slide right there, because I don't want people in the community to think it's all reactive, that the schools just keep hiring people to counsel kids. In reality, what we keep trying to do is to make sure that we are doing what that slide says and teaching and modeling and practicing all of those kinds of behaviors, because they are competencies that can be taught. CASEL does have 5 core competencies, and you can see them here on the CASEL graphic. On the next slide, I do have them itemized by that sort of inner core: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. But I love this graphic because I like the blue circles that surround it. I mean, I think it's really important to see that this work happens in a classroom through SEL instruction and classroom climate. It happens in our schools, kind of in that big and global way, so we establish a school-wide culture. There are practices, there are policies, there are things that we're doing all the time in our schools. But then we also have to remember that in this same ring of those kinds of authentic partnerships that we have with families and caregivers, and we have to have those kinds of aligned opportunities with our community. And Hopkinton is super lucky to have Youth and Family Services, to have a whole lot of those other groups, the Department of Public Health. I can't tell you how many grants we work on collaboratively with those other 2 organizations. So we do have this happening in Hopkinton, and we're fortunate to have it. In terms of those 5 competencies, programs have to be universal. That is, for use with all students, delivered during the school day, designed for students from preschool all the way to high school. And I think that we are doing that and doing it very well here in Hopkinton. Over the past 5 or more years, every one of our school buildings has had an SEL goal in their school improvement plans. So what does that look like? I asked the 5 building principals to kind of help me out with this. And what I asked them for was just a smattering. Like, what is it that we're doing in Hopkinton, just some sample practices. If we were to put everything up there that we're doing, it would take hundreds of slides, because they really do have so many curricular and support kind of programs in place. So I'll just go through them very quickly. At the Marathon School, some examples. We have a guidance counselor and a school psychologist who have created lessons, and those have now been handed off to classroom teachers. And they work on the zones of regulation, they work on social thinking. One of their sort of school-wide initiatives, and you'll see this across the elementary schools, is the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, PBIS is what everybody calls that. And of course, they have ongoing professional learning for their faculty. And then when we have students who are struggling, we have established Cubby's Den, which is part of the BRIGHT program. And sort of to Dr. Zaleski's credit here, we had a BRIGHT program in the upper schools, and she decided that it was time to bring it to our elementaries as well, and that has been done quite successfully. At Elmwood, we have our school counselor who's done a beautiful job of creating these sort of videoed thematic lessons, and they go out to the hybrid and remote classrooms. And when I say thematic, they are all about, so you're coming back to school on April 5th, what's it going to feel like when you have new friends in your classroom? I mean, any of those kinds of things, and she does a beautiful job putting them together. Again, we have PBIS. At the Elmwood School, we had a social emotional learning parent night, and our presenters were, again, our school counselor and a BCBA. Lots of professional learning for faculty, and again, not unlike their counterparts at Marathon, Elmwood has the Roost, where they house the BRIGHT program. At Hopkins, and again, we have to remember this is just sort of a smattering of things that you see here. They, in terms of curriculum, they have the Castle focus areas for personal development, I'm sorry. And what's happening there is that those are now sort of being assessed by teachers, and they have been added to the report card. Mrs. Bolello has worked very hard to purchase texts that have SEL themes. Again, PBIS and professional learning for her faculty. And in terms of response to struggle, there are tiered supports. So there's counseling that happens in the classroom, lunch groups, peer-to-peer groups, and the Empower program. All right, at the middle school, the guidance department now delivers guidance lessons, and again, covering various issues. A school-wide initiative, there's Hiller Strong program, which is designed to build strong minds and hearts, and I think you'll remember that that's sort of part of their mission statement at the middle school, which I have always loved. Professional learning for their faculty, and in response to struggle, homework-free weekends, a power program, and same at the high school. We have the vision of the graduate at the high school. And I also added in the CVTE program because I wanted to highlight just how important something like that is. When I first came on board and I did the survey that was sort of about culture, equity, diversity, inclusion, a lot of the responses said, I don't know that I was that kid who kind of fit the Hopkinton mold. I don't know that I was destined for a 4-year, university. And I think the CVTE program is really showing our kids that there's a lot of different things that you can do out there, and really opening their eyes to all kinds of available options. And a school-wide initiative, Mr. Bishop has spent an awful lot of time with Challenge Success, and I think that was partially funded by another group in town. So, again, good community connections, but Challenge Success has been great in educating students and families and faculty. So, good program there. So why do we have difficulty, I think, with adolescents, social, emotional, and mental wellness? And I don't want us to think that it's just adolescents, but we really start to see it kind of emerge there as problematic. And on the left-hand side, you'll see some of those things that are, maybe those kinds of things that are those bigger things that are less easy to control, like a traumatic life experience, substance use, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, behavioral disorders. And on the right-hand side, you see those kinds of things that are, sort of part of what we might describe as more everyday life for a teen. Social media and social networking. Kids are very engaged in that. That whole college end game, I have to do this because it'll get me into college, is what we hear our kids say very frequently. The academic expectations, I can't get a C in this class, I have to get that C up to a B. There's parental pressure, there's the culture of competition. I need to do better than the person sitting next to me. And then, of course, cultural differences, I think, are also things that are obstacles to our kids' emotional wellness. We have a whole bunch of additional initiatives, and this really did come to me from Dr. Zaleski, so these are things that she has been working on. So the Empower program, BRIGHT programs, Positive Behavior Intervention System, PBIS, 3-tiered substance prevention and intervention support, and currently in the process of building a 3-tier mental health support system. So that's the programmatic stuff. On an individual level, we have individual counseling and then family interventions. In terms of connections, we have that are external, beyond the walls of the school, connections with HOP, Interface, Genesis, Castlebrook, inpatient and outpatient facilities, collaboration and communication with outside providers. So, sometimes you have those conversations between someone who is an in-school, guidance counselor, school adjustment counselor, therapist, with the outside provider. DCF, Department of Mental Health, the justice system, and placements with medical and other providers. So all of those things are groups that we are constantly collaborating with about our students. And then in terms of personnel, we have hired many BCBAs and school adjustment counselors. So I think that these slides show you the magnitude of what's going on with SEL and just how important it is at curricular levels. We're teaching it, we're kind of modeling it, we're living it, we're training our faculty, and we are even extending ourselves way far beyond our school walls. So it might sound like we are doing everything and it's wonderful and it's rosy and it couldn't be any better. Just to kind of go through this slide very quickly, these are opportunities for our students. In terms of parents, we have safety care training for families that Dr. Zaleski's done. She's done some next level parenting trainings, things like DBT therapy, managing stress in the time of COVID, that kind of stuff. And then just recently, we've been working on providing some resources for staff. So she's got Riding the Wave of Change during COVID-19. Different kinds of mindfulness and stress reduction techniques, and then there'll be a 3-part series with Castlebrook, and our staff also gets PBIS training as well, and action planning for that. So, what do we need? And maybe all of what you've just seen speaks to the great work that everyone is doing, but we need to remember that even if we've had social emotional learning on our school improvement plans over 5 years, our school building principals are principals first, and they are also instructional leaders. I know that when I was assistant superintendent, and I'm sure that Mrs. Parson will agree, that our building principals do a whole lot in the way of leading professional development. So they've already got like a job and a half. And then they've taken on this social emotional learning thing as well, and you can see all the things that they've pieced together. Sometimes it's a really nice kind of almost K to 12-ish kind of program where you've got like PBIS and Empower and all of that. But sometimes it's, I'm going to try a homework-free weekend, or we do challenge success. Well, in my building, we're teaching the Castle core competencies. Oh, over here we have Cubby's Den, and those things are all great things. But I think what we are lacking is that kind of consistency in our programming. And where we've worked very hard to bring something like consistent programming to K to 3 reading, I think we also need to start thinking now about bringing consistent programming to social emotional learning. It's critical at this point in time. I think we've done just about as much as we can by continuing to work at the building level. So we probably need someone to help us to kind of grow that programming based on research, based on best practices. One of the things that you'll see if you go to the Castle website is they'll tell you a lot of times you put tons and tons and tons of energy into all the programs, and you just saw all of that in that kind of sampling. But we don't really know the efficacy of those programs right now. There hasn't been anyone to say, well, let me measure the success of a homework-free weekend, or let me measure the success of having kids leave the classroom, go to Cubby's Den, become regulated, be able to learn self-regulation techniques there and go back. Maybe one of those things is highly successful. Maybe one of those things is not so successful. We really don't know the answers to that. So that's kind of where we are. I think if our building principals, when it comes to SEL, had one sort of wish, it would be that K-12 administrative position where we had a real expert come in and do those kinds of assessments to really grow our programming and to grow the consistency of it. And that is what I have learned recently from working with the building principals on this. You know, I admire and, you know, marvel at all the work that they've done, but I think that we probably do need that support. All right, and we're getting to the end here. So K-5 is opening on Monday, and again, I just want to say thank you. It has been a dizzying week. I know that people are exhausted, and I think that they are probably too almost professional and proud to say how exhausted they are. But the building principals and assistant principals, all of our educators, the paraprofessionals, the secretaries, our techs, our food service folks, the custodians, the nurses, I hope I'm not leaving anyone out, but all of those people at the building level have been working enormously hard, K-5. It's been a frightening week for everybody, and hopefully on Monday morning, as our kids trickle in, it will appear seamless to the children how hard the adults have worked in the last week. And that's all I got. So thank you for your patience. I know that was a lot.
It's wonderful, Leah. Go ahead.
I just want to say I am overwhelmed by how much work our staff has done. I just, you know, I think I was telling somebody, doing a full-time job and coming to these meetings and having to read all the materials seems like a ton for me. And they have had to do everything they would normally do in the summer, above and beyond their full-time jobs, and it's just amazing. And I'm really, really glad that it seems to be coming to fruition, and that hopefully they all get, you know, that sense of accomplishment on Monday, that all their hard work goes towards exactly that seamless transition. So thank you so much. And I think the other thing that really highlighted for me is how much our special education director has been doing in terms of cell work as well. Like that SCL, like all those programs and everything that she has been really pushing and dealing with at the same time as she's dealing with the special education, which is a huge job in and of itself. So that, you know, once again, wow, our staff is super amazing.
Yes. You know, this is not a small district. We're a moderately sized district, and, you know, many people have a special education director or director of student services, and our director of student services kind of handles all of our 504s, all of our IEPs. You can see how much work she's doing with SEL and substance abuse and all of that. So, you know, I know there would be people who would say, well, why can't she just take over SEL? And I don't know that we could spread her any thinner. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
It's all appreciated. Thank you.
I found this very heartening, this presentation. And I mean, I always enjoy your presentations, but I think the focus on social emotional learning, especially in the wake of this very difficult year. Notice how I say wake and it's not even over yet. It is so appreciated by families, by students, by the teachers, all of whom have suffered a lot this year. And it's heartening to know that this kind of care is already embedded in the curriculum in each of our buildings. And we see what a great job that the teachers and the administrators are doing across the board. I just think we are the luckiest district to have such an amazing team of administrators and teachers who are doing this in the midst of a pandemic. Because the programs are really impressive. I'm sure that when we were youngsters, we had social emotional learning was, here's a lollipop, right? So I'm just very moved and grateful for all of this. I think it's fantastic. Thank you.
Yes. Well, and you know, they do it because they care so deeply.
Yes.
Truly.
Yes.
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 They care so deeply for children. So, you know, I'm grateful to be here just to present it, but all the hard work is really behind the scenes.
It's fantastic.
So, just want to thank you for, I think sometimes we focus so much on the crisis of what's in front of us and the need to put in adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, and whatnot in places that where the crisis is, but all the work that's going on to kind of help prevent some of the crisis, I think sometimes doesn't get the flashy news that the crisis itself does. I think that we are in a better position than many districts entering into a difficult year with the pandemic in terms of dealing with the mental health needs and social emotional needs of our kids. But I agree with what you say about looking to need a district-wide coordinator. So thank you for all of that and for highlighting the programs for us.
And you know, we really don't know what it's going to look like in the fall when everyone is back for real. And who knows, maybe we will be looking for more school adjustment counselors or more BCBAs, just because we'll need them to help kids. We're going to have kids in the fall who haven't been in school in, what, 18 months?
Right.
That's a very, very long time for some children.
And children who are coming back from increased trauma from all that they've been through in the time that has passed since they were in school full-time.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the SEL program at Elmwood School in particular, especially, you know, not just during the past year, but the year prior as well. And I agree, it's all proactive work that's instilling these values at a young age. I like the idea of kind of having consistency across the schools too, because there may be kind of different philosophies or demands on different schools, and having a coordinator across could help smooth out that experience for students as they transition from one school to another. That was a long presentation. I lost track. Did your presentation start with the enrollment numbers? Can I ask about that too?
It did, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. So if you're able, there was I think it was maybe the final slide of the enrollment numbers. I wasn't sure I was able to read it correctly, so I want to make sure I get it. Yeah, that one. So can you help me understand the columns? I know enrollment from 2019 to 2020, I get, well, I'm not sure I get that. It says 33. So what do these numbers mean? Does it mean at this point in time in the year that were that many enrolled, or?
So when you see the 33 carrying over,
Yeah.
those would be the 33 children who had been in preschool that moved into kindergarten. But then you see the 256 students who are approved there. So the 33 would have been joined by like 223 peers to get to 256.
Oh, I see.
You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And that's why the approval number is so large for K, because that would be all of the incoming kids, not kids who are already in our district.
Right.
So in first grade, we had 270 kids who would have been there, and we approved to add in 32 of them, but 24 of those kiddos left us
I see.
along the way.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then I know you're tracking carefully current enrollments into kindergarten for next year, right? And
Yes.
it's been high, and that might have been on a previous slide or something. But it's high compared to this point in the year compared with typical years. And we'll see how that continues to increase. But are you also seeing a lower number for first grade? Because I'm wondering how many people may have held out their kindergartner a year because they didn't want them to have a fragmented experience this year, and their age was appropriate that they could hold them back. And so we're getting 2 years of kindergartners coming in and maybe fewer first graders?
Of those 35, and I hope this is the correct number, but I believe Georgette told me this morning that 12 of those 35 are first graders. So one of the things that Mrs. Parson and I had talked about last spring was how many folks would maybe homeschool their kindergartner and then just register them for first grade, because kindergarten isn't compulsory in Massachusetts. So that might be one of the things that we are seeing, or maybe they are people who took their children off to like a Montessori or something, and now will enroll them in the Hopkinton Public Schools. But if 1/3 of those students are first graders, it is telling us a story, I think.
Right. Well, connect the dots, because you guys looked, so what is the story? Or either of you, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think and I don't think this is just a Hopkinton story. I
Yeah.
think we're hearing this all around. I think people have been very worried about their young children.
Yeah.
And people, we know, typically worry, especially about children who are on the younger end of the age spectrum. I think I don't know that we have the answer yet. I think it's something we're going to have to watch very carefully. You know, with anybody who said, I'm planning on homeschooling my child this year, especially at those age levels, I was very clear with families, you need to keep your eye on the enrollment, and probably one thing that we could do is reach out to those families and be very specific with them, because sometimes when families are in homeschooling, they don't necessarily think about, oh my gosh, I have to get back to Hopkinton and inform them. Because usually our home education families don't come back to us. Usually they make a family decision. That's the educational pathway they want to pursue. But this year in particular, it's different. So I think we just have to keep our eye on what's happening with our youngest learners, because we could see more kids in places where we wouldn't have anticipated they belong, at least chronologically.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Yep. Thank you.
It seems like historically we get such a surge in the summer that this number seems very high for early April.
Yes, that's very true. You know, typically you wouldn't have that 174. And one of the things that usually happens in the summer is that if folks have moved into the district and it gets to be about August 1st, that's when, you know, families say, oh gosh, it's August 1st, we need to register you for school. So typically in the first 2 weeks of August, you'll kind of get a huge influx of new students. And, you know, we're seeing some signs of that already. And maybe, who knows, maybe it's pandemic fatigue, maybe it's people held their kids out, and, you know, we'll have, I think, in the kids who are registered for kindergarten, there may be 10 in that group who are technically first grade aged, which we'll have to look at.
So I guess my follow-on, though, is this year's kindergarten class lower than typically, or is it just as big as typical?
Let's take a look at them. We can, right? So this year's current enrollment in K is 269. So yeah, it's a little bit smaller.
Okay.
And if you look at some of the others, you've got a 274, 264, 288. But those are on the low side now for Hopkinton for sure.
Yep.
Is it still true, even though we have full-day kindergarten, that our kindergarten tends to be a little bit smaller than our first grade?
It can be, yes.
But kids that maybe go to a preschool program that goes through kindergarten and they choose private kindergarten? No.
Well, I just want to thank you for that comprehensive report. I especially am thankful for the SEL overview. I know it's a lot of people wonder sort of what we do. And it's interesting to have that back-to-back with Ms. Rothermick's presentation, because I saw that continuum of sort of emergency intervention versus sort of predictive maintenance. And I think we're doing a lot of what we call sort of predictive maintenance, because we're investing, it doesn't necessarily show up, but we've invested so heavily in sort of that infrastructure that it gives me, like Meg, it gives me that confidence that we have some pieces in place to begin to address some of what will come out of this pandemic. And I think in the same way that like our HVAC systems, because we take good care of them and we invest in them and we maintain them, when it came time for COVID, you know, we had them up and running. And I'm hopeful at seeing what we have for SEL interventions. And I also concur that a coordinator could leverage what we have, you know, assess it, leverage it, and you know, target any additional investments in ways that maybe we can't see. So I endorse that. Thank you for bringing that forward. I think we need to move on if we're okay with that.
I think we do too.
Thank you so much. I really don't have any slides for a chair report. I'm very quick tonight. I have approved warrants 21062 and 21063 that are in the packet, and payroll warrant S 21020. I also want to report that we've approved some executive session minutes. On 3/18, we approved minutes from executive session for August 11th, but we did not release them because the reason for the executive session still exists. Likewise, the October 1st, 2020 executive session minutes were approved. Those, in fact, were released with redactions. Tonight in our executive session, I'll just add, it's not on here, but it's just a report to you. I'll add that the school committee also approved minutes from September 3rd, executive session minutes from September 3rd, 2020, September 10th, 2020, September 14th, 2020, September 17th, 2020, and September 23rd, 2020. All of those minutes were approved, but also we voted not to release them because, again, the reason for the executive session still exists. which is how we manage executive session minutes. Okay, liaison reports.
I have a quick one.
Great.
So the turf field oversight committee met on Monday and positive report that the repairs that needed to be made to the turf field were covered by the company that had taken care of our turf, which included sewing the perimeter, restitching the seam on the perimeter, and also the seam between the infield and the outfield in the baseball section. And continuing to work on our rental policy and also the cleats and seeds policy, which has to do with metal cleats being used, which are not supposed to be used, and seeds that get sometimes spit into the field. So, working on that.
Anybody else?
The Growth Study Committee has been working on a report that is a really fascinating read on kind of the demographics in Hopkinton. The intersection for us, of course, is on population growth and population forecasts of growth. The superintendent and I are both on that committee. I'm not a voting member, but we have voiced our interest in sharing the enrollment forecast numbers that we have with that group. That group will be putting together a packet that will be widely shared, for example, at places like town meeting, visiting other committees to share their report. And at this point, I think it's important that we take a close look at that report and offer any final input, because the meeting last night, I think, they're really getting close to wrapping things up. And the superintendent and I, as I've mentioned, have offered to share data, and I think it would be helpful if we as a committee look at that current state of that draft.
I didn't realize that the school committee did not have a voting position on that committee. But,
No, I don't think, so none of the departments are really there, so you wouldn't see, someone from fire or police or DPW or any of them. It's, the growth study group, I think they were just sort of an appointed group that has been working over time.
Yeah.
And I think that we just attend out of
As
interest.
liaisons.
I mean,
Liaison.
clear interest in what's happening there.
So is that something that we can bring to a future meeting to look at the draft, do you think?
Yeah, we can reach out to the chair. Why don't we have an action to do that after this meeting?
Or highlights or something?
Yeah, to get a copy.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay. Let's see, we've covered civic ambassadors and Nature's Classroom, but we are now up to item C in the new business, Elmwood C paraprofessional, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Yes, this is a request that sort of comes jointly from Dr. Zaleski and Mrs. Carver. They are looking for the approval to fund a C-para position from now until the end of the school year. And this request comes about because we've had a student move into the district, and that student requires a C-para professional.
Discussion or motion?
The Unit C confused me. I was thinking of the bargaining Unit C. Now that makes sense.
I make a motion to approve the hiring of the paraprofessional for Elmwood.
Second. Okay, a motion by Meg, second by Leah. Is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, and it passes. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the school calendar, item D. Dr. Kavanaugh, 2021-22 school calendar.
Yes. So, and something makes me think that you had already approved this once before, but with the start time change, I know Georgette went in and made some changes so that you can see high school, middle school. It's now running 8 to 2:25, and all of our elementary schools will be running 9 to 3:15. And we have included in this the work of the calendar committee that had been in place a couple of years ago. So Diwali is on the calendar this year. Juneteenth has been added to the calendar. That might be on this year's calendar as well. I think that might be it. You can see that the last day of school is the 21st of June, which, it does feel like a late last day of school for us. And I think, as you kind of look through the calendar, there are several days that we do in fact have off. If we kind of go down, there's a no school day before Labor Day weekend, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Diwali, Good Friday, Juneteenth. So there are quite a few days in that calendar. But that is what the calendar committee a couple of years ago decided. And so it does extend the school year, but I think that it honors the sort of wishes of the community.
Any discussion?
The first week will be a bit tricky, won't it? The students come back for 2 days and then have 5 days off. So, not that we can change that, I just think it will be tricky.
And there is no option to change that. I mean, obviously, Labor Day is Labor Day, and Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah, and the no school day is a contractual agreement, I believe.
Yes.
So, with our current contract, that it is a large gap. It's going to be, disruptive for kids trying to find a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right, because contractually, we're not able to bring them back before the Monday before Labor Day. Is that accurate? The 30th, which is the Monday before Labor Day, is by contract, the earliest date we can bring the teachers back.
Yes.
It is an odd break right in there. Okay.
I'm going to be the odd man out and just say, you know what, 2 days, then 3 days,
No,
then 4 days. I mean,
there's nothing we can do.
You slowly get used to school again.
It's a nice soft reopening for parents in some ways.
yeah, it's tricky. I was kind of looking. We have, I think, 4.5 days off in September, but then October's pretty good, but then 5.5 in November and 5 in December. And, as we move to the spring, except for vacations, it's much better at a time when, especially as the older kids are looking at some of their high stakes testing, and all that work has to be done earlier in the year. So I was trying to see if there's any flexibility, but it's, again, to honor the work of the calendar subcommittee and make sure that we have, the right representation for our community, and we have to get our professional development days in, and of course there's the election day, November 2nd. I was trying to say, can we move that one, but that's election day. So I think we are kind of where we are. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find there's nothing that I could see with my layperson's view that was easily movable to improve anything. Are you looking for a vote?
If you are comfortable voting on this calendar tonight, that would be great.
Has it been, it does, I agree, 5.5 days off in November and 5.5 days off in December. Those are 4-day weeks. Have we really combed through this fully enough?
We voted it with the exception of, Juneteenth was not, we voted the calendar already at an earlier date, but there were a couple of changes to it.
So which specific changes are we voting now then, or do we not need a vote?
Election Day and Juneteenth, is that accurate, or the two changes?
And start times.
And the start times. Those are the only,
And Diwali, I think, is, well, I don't
which,
know.
yes, Diwali, but
on.
I thought that was in the original vote because that was part of the,
It may have been, yeah.
I feel like we had the same reaction the first time we looked at it.
I think we did. I think you see it again, you're like, oh gosh, especially this year where we know families have struggled with the variation in schedules and how disruptive that is for kids and families. So I think we have a new appreciation for what that does. So I think that's maybe why it's standing out a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the truth is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur happen at different times in different years, right? And so it just so happens that this year they fall in a way that it gives the children this 5-day gap. If you look at 22 to 23, it's a very different story, right? So I at least am comfortable with the fact that, you know, there's not a lot that can be changed, and that we want to honor the holidays of our community.
Yeah, I mean, that part's already decided, right? I mean, that calendar committee did that. And how many of the days are professional days?
Well, I was just going to ask, I mean, they're listed, but I know this year we have a different arrangement for our election, our town election. Do you have any indication as to whether that would change? Well, I guess we can't change the second. There's nothing, I'm trying to see if we could move this professional development day in November somewhere else, but we really can't, right?
If that's election day,
Yeah.
we typically don't.
And they can't, there's no talk of holding it elsewhere. There's no other location at this moment that you've heard.
So that's an interesting question, because Mr. Keller, Mr. Person, and I met with Connor Deegan, just because this year is such an anomaly. And, you know, we had a very good conversation about how, you know, the middle school is centrally located. You know, the parking is pretty expansive there, in terms of it being, you know, handicapped accessible. And I think Connor even said that, you know, a state official had come to look at all of different communities' voting sites, and said, you know, that Hopkinton Middle School is, you know, just a supreme voting site, which is nice to hear and also not so nice to hear. Because we did talk about things like, what about using, you know, the old center school or the senior center or those kinds of places, or even having people, you know, vote in precincts. So maybe have 4 different voting sites and divvy up the town. So we really haven't gotten that far. I think that they do like to use the middle school for its convenience. You know, one of the things Connor said is having one location enables him as the town clerk to be at the voting site all day. Wouldn't be splitting himself, so in
Makes
the
a lot
event that a
of
problem arises.
Can I ask one question, just out of curiosity? There's all these like Fridays that have bright yellow highlights, but there doesn't seem to be a definition for what a bright yellow highlight is.
Oh, you know what, I think if you look, there's a key, oops.
I think they're
It's early dismissal. It's on the right if you scroll down.
Yeah, but the early release days have the outer yellow, which a lot of days on Fridays have that outer yellow thing, but I don't see in the key anything that has the full highlight. That's what I was confused by.
Is it the middle schools included? I don't know.
The darker yellow, and maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Leah, but I think the lighter yellow ones are for the elementary, and the darker yellow ones must be district. We don't ever release the high school early without the elementary schools, do we?
Right, so if you look at the key at the bottom, when elementary and high school both have an early release, it's 9/16, 10/14, what are some of the others? 5/12, 3/17. So if you look at May 12th, March 17th, on those, it's when elementary and secondary both have them, they get the full color yellow. If it's just elementary, it gets the outline.
Okay.
Okay, see, so my middle-aged eyes couldn't see that actually is only an outline. It just blurred into a light yellow.
Well, my
Right,
explanation
so-
was very wordy, so.
No, now I get
so
what.
that was the thing, like I couldn't find what the full yellow meant, because everything's outlined in yellow and the key. That's all. Okay.
Amanda, if you think that we've already kind of combed through all the possibilities on the calendar, and if the superintendent needs a vote, I guess we should vote. But if you think there's more that we should look into, then we could.
I think at this point, we have voted this once. This is a sort of an update with the new start times, I think, and, you know, and the couple new holidays. But I actually think, I don't know if Juneteenth, I think that's the only new one, right? I think Diwali was already on there, to your point. So I think that it had been socialized quite a bit before we voted it the first time. I think it's reasonable to vote it.
So I make a motion to approve the calendar for 21-22.
Motion by Meg.
Second.
And a second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. So it passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
We just had the administrators go through it with a fine-tooth comb as well. So I might have been fibbing to you about those colors because, I mean, what I was telling you was true, but I was looking at the wrong calendar.
Yeah, I was
'cause now
going to
we're on
say that.
22-23.
I was going to say that, but we got the gist.
I must have already turned the page.
That's okay.
Okay, so here's 22, 23, sort of the same thing. And again, you've got Tuesday, June 20th as a final release date. I mean, I think one of the things that's a little bit better is that, you have a start on August 29th. So, the way the calendar works, you'll be pushing back into dates in August again, and then it'll come back around and start with September. So you're kind of gaining, I guess, one day there on that year.
I think Yom Kippur happens to fall in October, which spreads out that
Yes.
group in September.
Yeah, I mean, you get a different feel in this calendar because in the August, September, and the first one, you only had an 18-day month, but this year, in 22, 23, you have a 20-day month,
Yeah.
which is a big difference.
And you say the administrative team has looked this over.
They have, yes. I shouldn't say the whole team, I mean the building principals have.
Yes, it's what a difference a year makes. This year looks much more balanced, that just the way things fall. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve this calendar?
Do we typically approve calendars that far in advance? Because we just approved next year's now.
We
With the-
began to approve 2 years. The community had really requested more advanced planning, so we're trying to be able to offer a projection beyond just 1 year. A lot of districts do that.
Okay, thanks.
I make a motion to approve the 22-23 calendar. Second.
Motion by Meg and second by Leah. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained. Okay, it passes. All right, thank you. Going back to the agenda. Oops. Okay, I think we're up to Dr. Kavanaugh, memorandum of agreement with the HTA.
Yes, so we have currently negotiated a tentative agreement with the HTA. What typically happens is that they bring it back to their organization first for ratification, and I believe that will be happening next week. So this was probably on our agenda just a little bit prematurely. We'll have to come back to this next week.
Perfect. Okay, and policy JFABF, educational opportunities for children in foster care. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, so these two policies are really here almost for perfunctory reasons. We are, as we all know, going through tiered focus monitoring with the state to ensure that, kids' civil rights are met, to ensure that, our L students and our students on IEPs have equity and access in terms of their education. So 2 of the policies that DESE has asked us to take a little bit of a look at are JFABF as well as JF. The only change that we would need to be making to JFABF is to parenthetically include preschool on that first page, and then to include the 2 cross-references on the second page. But because of just that simple wording change on the first page, we thought it would be worth bringing it to you so that you could approve this. Because Dr. Zaleski is on kind of a quick timeline with these, I know you usually take 2 readings, but this one feels like you may not need to.
I think this is almost a, just an academic, a wording. It's a small change. I'm sure the community will understand.
Housekeeping.
It's housekeeping. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Housekeeping matter. So I personally feel comfortable with voting it. Does the committee agree? Okay. Anyone want to make a motion?
I will move that we approve policy, and now I don't have the letter in front of me, policy JFABF as presented.
Okay, motion by Nancy.
Second.
Second by Meg. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nope. Okay, it passes 5-0.
Well,
And
thank you.
JF?
And the second one is policy JF, which is school admissions and residency requirements. It was not long ago that this one was before you, and I think, let's see, when was that? Yeah, so it was just last summer that we were looking at this policy. And I think we gave it a very good looking over then. What DESE is recommending is that we codify the fact that every year, all of our students who are returning, whether you are a student who is attending in district or if you're a student with an out-of-district placement, you still have to fill in that returning registration form. And, you know, we ask all of our families to kind of go into Power School and fill that out in case, you know, a cell phone number or an email address or something like that has changed. And we can always ask for proof of residency annually, of course. And then as you are looking at some of that other highlighted stuff, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education wants us to indicate that there are exemptions to the policy. For example, if you are a student who is categorized as homeless, if you're a student who is in foster care, or if you are a student from a military family. And they just want us to add that to this policy to ensure that in writing we are very careful about how residency applies to those three categories of student.
So where it says certain exceptions apply to the above policy, the exceptions are then listed below, right?
Correct.
That's how that reads, okay.
Right, so you, I mean, essentially you can't hold a homeless student out of school because they can't produce residency documents, you know, that sort of thing.
How does the committee feel about taking a vote on these changes? I think these are clarifying, in many cases, what we intended.
It's not changing any of the practices of what we're doing.
Right.
No. No, I mean, these are really all required by law. I mean, it just states outright what it is that we are required to do by law.
Did you get any feedback on any of these?
We did not, no.
I did not either.
So in that case, with your permission, I would like to make a motion to approve policy JF, school admissions and residency requirements.
Second.
Okay, motion by Nancy, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, this passes 5-0. Thank you. Going back to the top, we have future agenda items. And here we are. I think we talked about a growth study topic as appropriate. Anything that we haven't talked about for agenda items, you can always shoot an email to Dr. Kavanaugh or myself. Okay. And items by consensus, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I actually have a discussion point on this one.
Okay.
I think it's in the 1-4. Yeah, my last name is misspelled.
January 4th.
So I approve them with that edit of having my name respelled correctly.
Good catch.
So shall I restate the motion? The motion that I would like to make is a motion to approve the items by consensus as outlined with the edit of the spelling of Leah's name on January 4th.
Second.
Okay, motion by Nancy, second by Meg. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. And it passes. Terrific. We are at adjournment.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. And thank you to HCAM. Thank you to the community for watching. Thank you all for coming, Ms. Rothermick, Mrs. Parsons, and Dr. Kavanaugh. Our next meeting at the moment is scheduled for April 15th. We will likely have a meeting scheduled for next week as a special meeting, hopefully to ratify the MOA with the teachers union. So We'll hopefully see you next week. If not, we'll see you on the 15th. Thank you very
you.
much. Have a good night.
Happy April